I pressed my face closer to the pressure gauge, squinting at the numbers through my wire-rimmed glasses. 11 kilometers down in the Mariana Trench, and the reading still made my stomach flip. The titanium hull around us handled over 1,000 times the pressure at sea level, but that didn't stop the occasional groan from echoing through the lab corridors. "Still can't believe we're actually down here," I muttered, updating the logbook with today's readings. 3 months ago, this assignment felt like winning the scientific lottery. Now it just felt normal, which was probably more unsettling than the pressure readings. The specimen storage bay hummed with activity as I made my rounds. Zane stood hunched over one of the collection tanks, his auburn hair perfectly styled even after 12 hours of lab work. Show off. He held up a Pacific black dragon, its bioluminescent patches casting weird shadows across his face. "Francis, come look at this cellular structure," he called out, not taking his eyes off the fish. "The mitochondrial density is off the charts compared to surface specimens." I walked over, boots squeaking against the metal flooring. The anglerfish writhed in Zane's grip, its needle-sharp teeth catching the lab lights. Maybe it's the pressure adaptation. These things live in conditions that would crush us instantly. Maybe. Zane made another note in his tablet, then carefully placed the specimen back in its tank. Or maybe there's something else going on down here we haven't figured out yet. Beverly's voice crackled through the intercom system, interrupting my thoughts. "Attention team. This is Director Jordan. Just got off a call with corporate headquarters. They're extremely pleased with our collection rates this quarter. We're running ahead of schedule on specimen diversity and sample quality." I felt that familiar warm feeling in my chest. 3 months of 18-hour days, living in a metal tube at the bottom of the ocean, and we were actually making a difference. Real scientific discovery happening in real time. "Keep up the excellent work, everyone," Beverly continued. "Our research down here is breaking new ground in deep-sea biology. The data we're collecting will advance marine science for decades." Zane glanced at me with a slight smile. "Not bad for a bunch of fish nerds, right?" "Speak for yourself," I said, adjusting my glasses. "I prefer marine life enthusiasts." The intercom clicked off, and I went back to checking our environmental systems. Everything looked good, oxygen levels stable, water filtration running smooth, nuclear power core humming along at normal output. Cody had this place running like clockwork. Speaking of Cody, I spotted him emerging from one of the maintenance shafts, tool belt jangling as he walked. His coveralls were stained with what looked like hydraulic fluid, and he had that satisfied expression he got when fixing something complicated. "How's she holding up?" I asked, nodding toward the hull stress monitors. "Minor fluctuations in the lower sections," Cody said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Nothing outside normal parameters. This baby's built to handle way worse than what we're throwing at her." "Good to hear." I trusted Cody's judgment completely. Guy had more experience with deep-sea equipment than the rest of us combined. Allison appeared from the specimen prep area, carrying a tablet full of measurement data. Her dark hair was pulled back in its usual ponytail, and she had that focused look she got when the numbers didn't add up right. "Francis, I need to show you something weird," she said, pulling up a chart on her screen. "Look at these growth rates." I leaned in to study the data. 20% size increase across multiple species. "In just 3 weeks," Allison confirmed. "The Pacific black dragons, the anglerfish, even the smaller crustaceans, they're all getting bigger." "Controlled environment effect," I suggested. "Regular feeding schedule, optimal water temperature, no predation pressure." "That's what I figured too, but the rate seems excessive." Allison scrolled through more charts. "I've never seen deep-sea specimens adapt this quickly to lab conditions." Zane looked up from his workstation. Could be beneficial mutations. These organisms are incredibly adaptable. Give them better conditions, they respond accordingly. Maybe, Allison said, but she didn't sound convinced. I made a mental note to review the growth data myself later. Allison had an eye for details that the rest of us sometimes missed. If she thought something was off, it probably was. The lab settled into its evening rhythm as the day shift wound down. I loved this time. The quiet hum of equipment, the soft glow of specimen tanks, the sense that we were the only humans for miles in any direction. Sometimes I'd stand at the observation windows and stare out into the absolute darkness, knowing that incredible life forms were moving around out there, completely unaware of our presence. I was updating the daily logs when I noticed Zane still working in the storage bay. Nothing unusual about that. The guy was dedicated, I'd give him that. But he seemed to be taking extra tissue samples from several specimens, working with a precision that suggested this wasn't his first time doing whatever he was doing. I watched him for a few minutes, curious. He had a small collection kit I didn't recognize, and he was being very careful about labeling and storing the samples. Probably just thorough documentation for his research protocols. Zane was nothing if not methodical. The communication system chimed with an incoming call from topside. Beverly's voice came through clearly as she answered from the command center. Benthic Lab, this is Director Jordan. Evening, Beverly. This is Captain Morrison on the support vessel. Just checking in with your routine status report. All systems normal down here, Captain. Team's healthy, equipment's running smooth, research is progressing ahead of schedule. Excellent. Weather conditions up here are perfect. Calm seas, clear skies. Couldn't ask for better support conditions. Copy that. Anything else we need to know? Negative. Have a good evening down there. The comm clicked off, and I felt that familiar sense of isolation settle over the lab. 11 kilometers of black water between us and the surface world. Sometimes that felt comforting, like we were in our own private research bubble. Other times it felt terrifying. Tonight it felt comforting. I finished my logs and started my evening routine, checking specimen tank temperatures, reviewing tomorrow's collection schedule, making sure all the equipment was secured for the night shift. The lab had a peaceful quality after hours, when most of the team was either sleeping or working quietly at their stations. Zane was still in the storage bay, but I figured he'd wrap up soon. Guy needed sleep, just like the rest of us. I settled into my bunk with a marine biology journal, reading about bioluminescent adaptations in deep-sea organisms. The research we were doing down here would probably end up in journals like this someday. Real contributions to human knowledge about Earth's most extreme environments. The hull groaned softly around us, a sound I'd grown used to over the past 3 months. Just the ocean reminding us where we were, 11 kilometers down in the deepest part of the planet. I had no idea that far above us, sonar operators on the support vessel were staring at their screens in confusion, watching a massive object moving through the deep water toward our coordinates. The emergency alarm screamed through the lab like a banshee, cutting right through the peaceful hum of our equipment. I jerked my head up from the specimen logs, my glasses nearly sliding off my nose as the sound bounced off every metal surface around us. "What the hell?" I started, but Beverly's voice over the intercom cut me off. "All hands to stations. Emergency contact from surface team." I dropped my pen and rushed toward the communications bay, my boots clanging against the metal flooring. Beverly was already hunched over the radio console, her burgundy blazer wrinkled from leaning forward, one hand pressed against her earpiece. "Say again, Captain Morrison," she said into the microphone. "You're breaking up." The radio crackled with static before Morrison's voice came through, tense and clipped. Beverly, sonar's picking up a massive object heading directly for your position. Roughly 200 meters in length, moving at approximately 15 knots. My stomach dropped. 200 meters. That was bigger than a blue whale. Way bigger. Distance and time to contact? Beverly asked, her voice steady, but I could see her knuckles going white as she gripped the microphone. Current trajectory puts impact in approximately 12 minutes. The object appears to be alive, based on movement patterns. It's not following any predictable course. I felt the blood drain from my face. Alive. Something the size of a city block, alive, and heading straight for us. Zane appeared at my shoulder. His usually perfect hair slightly messed up like he'd been running his hands through it. Could be following thermal currents, he said, but his voice had lost its usual confident tone. Deep water species sometimes track warm water flows. Nothing gets that big, I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. Allison rushed past us toward the research terminals, her ponytail bouncing as she moved. I'm checking the database for any recorded sightings of large deep-sea organisms in this region, she called over her shoulder. Beverly keyed the microphone again. Captain, what are our evacuation options? Static filled the air for several long seconds before Morrison's voice returned. Negative on surface evacuation. We've got 30-foot swells up here and winds gusting to 60 knots. Your escape pods wouldn't survive the ascent in these conditions. The lab suddenly felt very small. 11 kilometers of crushing black water above us, and something massive approaching from the depths below. Cody! Beverly shouted toward the maintenance section. Emergency protocols now! I heard Cody's voice echo from somewhere in the lower levels. Already on it! Sealing non-essential compartments and bringing backup systems online. The hull around us groaned, a deep metallic sound that made my teeth ache. I'd gotten used to the normal pressure sounds over the past 3 months, but this was different. Heavier. Francis, help me secure the specimen containers, Zane said, already moving toward the storage bay. If this thing hits us, we can't have glass tanks flying around. I followed him, my hands shaking as I started tying down the smaller collection units. The Pacific black dragons swirled in their tanks, their bioluminescent patches flickering more rapidly than usual. Even they could sense something was wrong. 10 minutes to contact, Beverly announced over the intercom. Allison looked up from her terminal, her face pale. Nothing in the database, no recorded sightings of anything even close to this size in the Mariana Trench. The pressure readings on the wall monitors started fluctuating, small changes but enough to notice. Whatever was out there, it was big enough to displace massive amounts of water just by moving. I grabbed a loose tablet and shoved it into a storage compartment, my mind racing. What could survive at these depths and grow to that size? The pressure down here would crush most surface creatures instantly. But something had not only survived, but thrived enough to reach enormous proportions. 8 minutes, Beverly called out. Cody's voice crackled through the comm system. Emergency bulkheads are sealed. Backup power is online. Hull integrity is holding steady. But I'm reading some weird electromagnetic interference. Interference from what? Beverly asked. Unknown. It's like something's messing with our electrical systems from outside. The lab's lights flickered for a second, and I felt my heart skip a beat. Our life support systems ran on that power. Zane finished securing the last of the specimen tanks and moved toward the observation windows. If it's following natural behavior patterns, it might just be passing through. A lot of deep-sea creatures are curious, but not aggressive. At 200 meters long, I said, joining him at the window. That's not curious. That's a living submarine. The external cameras were picking up movement in the water around us. dark shapes shifting in the absolute blackness beyond our lights. I pressed my face against the reinforced glass, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. 6 minutes to contact, Beverly announced, her voice getting tighter. There. Allison pointed at one of the camera feeds. Lower starboard camera. We all crowded around the monitor. Something massive moved past the camera's range, just at the edge of our lights. A wall of flesh that seemed to go on forever, covered in what looked like scars or natural ridges. Jesus. Cody's voice came through the comm. That thing's the size of a football field. The hull groaned again, louder this time. The pressure readings spiked as thousands of tons of water got pushed around by whatever was circling us. 4 minutes, Beverly said into her microphone. Captain Morrison, are you getting this on sonar? Affirmative. The object has slowed its approach, but it's still heading directly for you. We're scrambling emergency response teams, but in these weather conditions. His voice trailed off. We all knew what that meant. If something went wrong down here, we were on our own. I helped Allison secure the last of the loose equipment, my hands trembling as I worked. 3 months of peaceful research, and now this. Whatever was out there had been living in these depths long before we arrived, and we were about to find out how it felt about visitors. 2 minutes to contact, Beverly announced. The lab fell silent except for the hum of life support systems and the occasional groan from the hull. We all stood at our stations waiting. Through the observation windows, the darkness seemed to be moving, shifting, getting closer. 1 minute, Beverly said, then keyed her microphone one final time. Captain Morrison, this is Director Jordan requesting immediate emergency response teams. Unknown contact imminent. If we lose communications... She paused, looking around at all of us. Tell corporate headquarters we maintained research protocols to the end. The radio crackled with Morrison's response, but his words were lost in a sudden, overwhelming sound that filled the lab. Not mechanical, not human. Something alive and very, very large, calling out from the depths around us. The impact hit us like a freight train made of water and fury. 1 second I was standing at the communications console, listening to Beverly coordinate with the surface team. The next, the entire lab lurched sideways with a grinding screech of metal that made my teeth hurt. I went flying into the nearest workstation, my shoulder slamming against the edge hard enough to knock the wind out of me. Emergency lighting flickered on as the main power died, bathing everything in that sick red glow that meant we were officially screwed. The lab had tilted at least 15 degrees, maybe more. Equipment that wasn't bolted down went sliding across the floor in a symphony of crashes and breaking glass. Hull breach in Section 7, Cody's voice echoed from somewhere below us, tight with controlled panic. Water's coming through the airlock seals. I pushed myself up from the floor, my glasses hanging crooked on my face. Through the observation windows, I could see why our world had just turned upside down. The creature was right there, pressed against the reinforced glass like it was trying to peer inside. Its body stretched beyond the range of our external lights, disappearing into the black water on both sides. The thing was covered in scars, deep gouges and ridged patterns that looked like they'd been carved by something with very large, very sharp teeth. Its hide had a texture like ancient leather, and bioluminescent patches along its sides pulsed in slow, hypnotic patterns. The light show was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Damage reports now, Beverly shouted over the sound of groaning metal. She'd managed to stay on her feet during the impact, one hand gripping the communications console while the other worked the backup systems. Air filtration is holding, Allison called out from the environmental station, but I'm reading pressure drops in the lower sections. I helped Beverly bring the emergency communications online, my hands shaking as I worked the controls. The backup power hummed to life around us, but whole sections of the lab remained dark. Through the hull, I could hear water moving in places where it definitely shouldn't be. "Surface team, this is Benthic Lab," Beverly spoke into the emergency radio. "We've sustained major structural damage, requesting immediate evacuation support." Static filled the air for several long seconds before Morrison's voice crackled through. "Copy that, Beverly. We're reading massive electromagnetic interference from your position. The creature appears to have stopped moving." I looked out the observation windows again. The thing was just floating there, its massive bulk blocking out most of our view of the surrounding water. Those bioluminescent patches kept pulsing, but slower now, almost like it was thinking. "Cody, status report," Beverly called into her headset. "Emergency bulkheads are holding in sections 5 and 6. His voice came back, strained with effort. "But we've got flooding in the specimen storage bay. I'm trying to seal it off before we lose the whole lower level." My stomach dropped. The specimen storage bay. All our research samples were down there, including the creatures we'd been studying for months. If that section flooded completely... "The containers," I said, grabbing Beverly's arm. "All our specimens are in the storage bay." She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not just worry about the research data, something deeper. Something that looked almost like guilt. A new sound echoed through the lab, the sharp crack of breaking glass. Then another, and another. "The specimen containers are compromised," Allison reported, her voice tight. "I'm reading multiple containment failures in the storage bay." That's when I saw Zane. While the rest of us were dealing with the crisis, he'd grabbed one of his collection kits and was heading toward the damaged lower sections. Not away from the danger, toward it. "Zane, where are you going?" I called after him. He paused at the access ladder, his face calm in a way that seemed completely wrong for our situation. "Someone needs to assess the specimen damage for the incident report." "Are you insane? That section's flooding." "The water's only ankle deep," he said, already starting down the ladder. "I'll be quick." I watched him disappear into the red-lit corridor below, that collection kit clutched in his hand like it was the most important thing in the world. Something about his behavior made my skin crawl, but I had bigger problems to worry about. The structural alarms were going crazy now, indicating critical hull stress in 3 different sections. But when I looked out the observation windows, the creature wasn't ramming us or trying to break through. It was just there, moving slowly along the lab's exterior like it was examining us. "Beverly, I've got contact with the surface," I said, adjusting the radio frequency to cut through some of the interference. "Morrison, can you hear us?" "Barely." His voice came through the static. "That thing's bioelectric field is playing hell with our communications. We're reading massive electromagnetic pulses every few seconds." I glanced at the creature outside. Those bioluminescent patches were pulsing in rhythm with the radio interference. The thing was like a living electrical storm. "What's your status up there?" Beverly asked into the microphone. "Weather's still brutal, but we're trying to get a rescue submersible ready. Problem is, we can't get a clear sonar reading with all this electromagnetic noise. We're flying blind." The lab shuddered again as the creature shifted position. Not violent this time, just a gentle movement that sent ripples through the water around us. But even gentle movements from something that size were enough to stress our hull beyond its design limits. "Cody, how are those emergency systems holding up?" Beverly called into her headset. "Backup power's stable, but I'm losing sensors in the flooded sections." His voice crackled back. "And there's something else. The emergency lighting down here. It's attracting something." I felt ice water run down my spine. "Attracting what?" The specimens that got loose when their containers broke, they're following the light sources. Of course they were. Deep-sea predators used bioluminescence to hunt. Our emergency lighting system was basically sending out dinner invitations to every escaped creature in the flooded sections. "How many specimens are we talking about?" Beverly asked, but her voice had that guilty tone again. "Hard to say," Cody replied. "But I can see at least 3 large forms moving in the water down here. And they're definitely not acting like the docile research subjects we've been studying." Through the observation windows, the massive creature's eye came into view. It was easily the size of a dinner plate, dark and intelligent, studying our lab with what looked like deliberate curiosity. When it blinked, the movement sent another shudder through our hull. "Surface team, this is Benthic Lab." Beverly spoke into the radio again. "How long until you can get a rescue vehicle down here?" Static filled the air before Morrison's voice returned. "Unknown. The electromagnetic interference is getting worse. We can barely maintain communications, let alone navigate a submersible through this." I stared out at the creature, watching those bioluminescent patches pulse in their slow, hypnotic rhythm. The thing had been heading straight for us, but now it was just waiting, like it was trying to figure out what we were, or what we'd been doing down here. The lab's hull groaned around us, a deep metallic sound that reminded me exactly how far we were from any possible help. 11 kilometers of crushing black water above us, flooded sections below us, and something the size of a city block deciding whether we were worth its attention. And somewhere in the darkness of our own lab, the creatures we'd been studying were loose and hunting. I pushed through the knee-deep water in the flooded storage bay, my boots slipping on the metal grating below. The emergency lighting cast everything in that hellish red glow, making the floating debris look like chunks of meat and blood. That's when I saw her. Allison floated face down near the far wall, her teal lab coat spread around her like wings. Her diving suit had been shredded along the torso, long tears that looked deliberate, purposeful. "Oh God," I whispered, wading toward her as fast as the water would let me. I reached her and carefully turned her over. Her face was pale, eyes wide open and staring at nothing. But it was the wounds that made my stomach lurch. Deep puncture marks along her neck and shoulders, too precise to be from debris or broken glass. Bite marks. "Francis," Zane's voice echoed from the access ladder behind me. "What's the situation down there?" I couldn't answer right away. Allison had been investigating something down here when the creature hit us. She'd been trying to figure out why our specimens were growing so fast, why they were acting different. Now she was dead, and those same specimens were nowhere to be seen. Zane splashed into the water beside me, that collection kit still clutched in his hand. When he saw Allison's body, his face went through the motions of shock and grief, but something felt off about his reaction. Too clinical, too detached. "We need to get her out of here," I said, reaching under Allison's arms. "Wait." Zane grabbed my wrist. "I need to document the wounds first, for the incident report." I stared at him. "She's dead, Zane. The incident report can wait." But he was already pulling out some kind of sampling tool, leaning over Allison's torn diving suit with the same focused expression he used when examining specimens. The bite pattern could tell us which creature was responsible. Look at the spacing between these puncture marks. "Are you seriously taking samples from her body right now?" "It's evidence, Francis. We need to understand what we're dealing with." I wanted to punch him. Instead, I helped him lift Allison out of the water, my hands shaking as we carried her toward the access ladder. Her research notebook floated nearby, its waterproof pages still intact. I grabbed it with my free hand. "Beverly, we found Allison," I called into my headset as we reached the ladder. She didn't make it." Silence for several seconds. Then Beverly's voice, tight with grief. "Bring her up. We'll seal that section once you're clear." Getting Allison's body up the ladder was the worst thing I'd ever had to do. Zane kept muttering about tissue samples and documentation while I tried not to look at the wounds that had killed her. When we finally reached the main lab level, Beverly was waiting with an emergency blanket. "How many specimens are unaccounted for?" I asked as we laid Allison down. Beverly checked her tablet, her hands trembling slightly. 3 confirmed missing. The Pacific Black Dragon from Tank 7 and both anglerfish from the Deep Collection. "The Black Dragon did this," Zane said, pointing at Allison's wounds. "See the spacing? Classic predatory strike pattern, but the bite force is much stronger than we recorded in our initial studies." I flipped through Allison's waterproof notebook, my blood getting colder with each page. She'd been documenting changes in the specimens for weeks. Growth rates that didn't make sense, behavioral modifications, increased aggression during feeding. She knew something was wrong, I said, holding up the notebook. "Look at these notes." She was tracking unauthorized changes in the specimens. Zane glanced at the notebook, then quickly looked away. "Environmental stress can cause rapid adaptation in deep-sea organisms." "This isn't adaptation," I said, reading Allison's careful handwriting. She documented puncture marks in the specimen containers. Someone was injecting them with something. "Francis," Cody's voice crackled through the comm system. "We've got a problem up here. The emergency lighting is drawing them." I looked up at the red lights bathing our lab. Of course. Deep-sea predators use bioluminescence to hunt. Our emergency system was basically sending out hunting signals to every escaped creature in the flooded sections. "They're using our own lights against us," I said. Beverly keyed her headset. "Cody, can you switch to minimal lighting?" "Negative. Emergency protocols won't let me shut down the safety systems. But I can see movement in the air ducts. Something's using the ventilation system to move between sections." The lab's hull groaned around us as the massive creature outside shifted position again. More water started dripping from the ceiling, and I could hear new stress fractures opening in the lower sections. "We need to evacuate," Zane said, already moving toward the emergency equipment. "The structure won't hold much longer." "Not without the research data," Beverly said firmly. 3 years of work. We can't just abandon it." I stared at her. "Allison is dead. Those things are hunting us. And you're worried about data?" "You don't understand what this research represents," Beverly said, her voice carrying that guilty tone again. "The applications, the potential benefits." A new sound echoed through the lab. A wet, sliding noise coming from the air vents above us. Something large moving through spaces that should have been too narrow for the specimens we'd collected. But our specimens weren't the same size anymore, were they? I looked down at Allison's notebook again, focusing on her final entries. She'd been investigating the specimen storage area when the creature hit us. She'd found something that got her killed. The sliding sound in the vents stopped directly above us. "Everyone move," I whispered. "Now." The emergency lighting flickered, casting dancing shadows across Allison's still form. Somewhere in the darkness above us, something that used to be a research specimen was deciding whether we looked like prey, and based on what had happened to Allison, I was pretty sure we did. I grabbed Zane by the shoulder and spun him around to face me. "What the hell did you do to them?" He looked confused for about half a second before his expression shifted to something I'd never seen before. Calculating. Cold. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his eyes flicked toward the specimen containers floating in the flooded storage area. I held up one of the broken tanks, pointing at the tiny puncture marks near the feeding port. These needle marks, Zane. Someone's been injecting our specimens with something. Allison documented it all. His perfect composure cracked just enough for me to see the truth underneath. Francis, you need to understand the bigger picture here. The bigger picture? I stepped closer, my voice rising. Allison is dead because of whatever you did to these things. The enhancement protocols were approved by corporate headquarters, Zane said, straightening his lab coat like we were having a normal conversation. Growth hormones, neural stimulants, metabolic accelerants. We're developing specimens that can survive in any aquatic environment. Enhancement protocols. The words tasted bitter. You mean weapons? I mean applications that could revolutionize marine biology, he said, but there was no conviction behind it anymore. Think about it, Francis. Organisms that can adapt to any depth, any temperature, any salinity level. The research possibilities are endless. I wanted to hit him. Instead, I pulled out my tablet and started scrolling through our research contracts, looking for anything about enhancement protocols or military applications. Most of the legal language had gone right over my head when I'd signed on, but now I was reading every word. Beverly, I called across the lab. We need to talk. She looked up from the communications console, her face already showing she knew what was coming. Francis, not now. We're dealing with a crisis situation. This is part of the crisis, I said, holding up my tablet. Section 12, subsection 4. Specimens may be subject to controlled enhancement procedures for defense applications. What the hell does that mean? Beverly's shoulders sagged. It means exactly what you think it means. You knew? I stared at her, feeling like the floor was dropping out from under me. You knew Zane was turning our research into weapons. The funding, Francis, she said quietly. Do you have any idea how much money it takes to run a facility like this? The legitimate research grants barely cover basic operations. So you sold out to defense contractors? I kept us operational, Beverly snapped. And Zane's modifications were producing incredible results. The growth rates, the enhanced survival capabilities. A wet sliding sound echoed from the air vents above us. We all looked up at the same time. That's impossible, Cody's voice crackled through the comm system. Those ducts are only 18 inches wide. Nothing we collected should be able to fit through there. Nothing we collected at their original size, I said, the pieces finally clicking together. But if they've grown 20% in 3 weeks. The sliding sound moved across the ceiling, following the path of the main ventilation system toward the lab's central area. I grabbed one of the emergency flares from the wall kit. Cody, get down here now, I called into my headset. And bring more flares. What are you thinking? Zane asked, but he was already backing away from the air vents. Deep-sea predators hunt using bioluminescence, I said, pulling the activation cord on the flare. Brilliant white light filled the lab, so bright it hurt to look at directly. But they also avoid light sources that are too intense. The sliding sound stopped immediately. Cody appeared at the access ladder, his tool belt jangling as he dropped into the main lab area. Smart thinking, he said, grabbing another flare from the emergency kit. But we've only got 6 of these. Then we better make them count, I said. A section of ceiling grating crashed down near the specimen tanks, and something dark and sleek dropped through the opening. The Pacific Black Dragon hit the floor with a wet thud. But it was wrong. All wrong. The thing was easily 3 feet long now, twice the size it had been when we'd first collected it. Its bioluminescent patches pulsed with an angry red light, and when it opened its mouth, the needle-sharp teeth looked like they could punch through steel. Jesus, Cody whispered. That thing's been eating steroids. I held the flare toward the creature, and it recoiled from the bright light, hissing like an angry cat, but it didn't retreat. Instead, it started circling us, staying just outside the flare's effective range. "It's learning," Zane said, his voice filled with what sounded like pride. The neural stimulants enhanced its cognitive function along with its physical capabilities. "Shut up," I said, keeping the flare between us and the black dragon. "Cody, can you get to the power controls?" "Maybe, but I'll have to cross open floor to reach the main panel." That's when the second ceiling grate gave way. 2 anglerfish dropped through, their grotesquely enlarged lures casting eerie shadows across the lab walls. They'd grown even more than the black dragon, their bodies swollen to the size of small sharks. The bioluminescent lures on their heads pulsed in sync with each other, like they were communicating. "They're coordinating," Beverly said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's not normal behavior for deep-sea predators." "Nothing about this is normal," I said, lighting a second flare. "Cody, go. We'll keep them busy." Cody sprinted toward the power controls while I waved the flares at the 3 enhanced specimens. They stayed back, but barely. The black dragon kept testing the edges of the light, darting forward and retreating when the flare got too close. "Beverly," I called over my shoulder. "How long have you known about this?" 6 weeks, she admitted. Zane showed me the preliminary results. The growth rates, the enhanced survival capabilities. Corporate was offering triple funding for continued development. Triple funding for weapons research. For applications that could save lives, she said. But even she didn't sound convinced anymore. Search and rescue operations, environmental cleanup, deep-sea exploration. One of the anglerfish lunged forward, and I barely got the flare up in time to drive it back. The heat from the burning magnesium was starting to make my hands sweat inside the protective glove. "Got it," Cody shouted from the power controls. Partial power restored to sections 3 and 4. Emergency lighting flickered on throughout the lab, but it was the wrong kind of light. The red emergency bulbs were exactly the wavelength that deep-sea predators used for hunting. Instead of driving the creatures away, we'd just made ourselves more visible. "Turn it off," I yelled, but it was too late. The black dragon shot forward like a missile, aiming straight for Zane. He tried to dodge, but the thing was faster than anything that size should have been. Enhanced reflexes, enhanced speed, enhanced everything. Zane screamed as the creature's teeth sank into his forearm. But instead of letting go, the black dragon held on, pumping venom into his bloodstream. Venom that had been enhanced along with everything else. "Get it off him," Beverly shouted. I jabbed the flare at the creature's head, and it finally released Zane's arm. But the damage was done. Dark veins were already spreading up from the bite wound, and Zane's face had gone pale. "The toxin," he gasped, staring at his arm in fascination even as it started to swell. The enhancement process increased the potency by at least 300%. "Zane, sit down," I said, but he was already collapsing. The black dragon disappeared back into the air vents, leaving us with Zane writhing on the floor as the enhanced venom worked through his system. His arm was turning black, the tissue literally rotting as we watched. "Do something," Beverly said. But there was nothing to do. Zane had created something that was too efficient, too deadly. His own enhanced specimen was killing him with toxins he'd designed to be unstoppable. "The irony," Zane whispered, his voice already slurring as the venom reached his nervous system. "My greatest achievement." He convulsed once, then went still. I looked down at the man who'd been my colleague for 3 months, who'd shared coffee and complained about the food, and talked about the wonders of deep-sea biology. Now he was dead, killed by his own creation. Outside the observation windows, the massive creature's bioluminescent patches pulsed in slow, steady rhythms. I was starting to understand why it had come here. Not random chance, not curiosity. It was following the signals from Zane's enhanced specimens, signals that didn't belong in the deep ocean. "Beverly," I said quietly, "that thing out there, it's not attacking us." She looked up from Zane's body. "What do you mean?" "It's trying to contain them. The enhanced specimens. It knows they don't belong here." The lab shuddered as the creature moved closer to our hull, its massive bulk blocking out what little light filtered down from the surface. But for the first time since this nightmare started, I didn't feel like we were being hunted. I felt like something was trying to help us clean up our own mess. I stared at Beverly as her words sank in. "Weapons? You're telling me we've been building underwater weapons?" She couldn't meet my eyes. "The benthic lab was never about pure research, Francis. The whole facility was designed to develop aquatic bioweapons, creatures that could infiltrate any marine environment, survive in any conditions." My hands were shaking as I pulled up our research contracts on the tablet, scrolling past all the scientific jargon I'd been so excited to sign. There it was, buried in subsection after subsection: military applications, defense contractors, weapons development protocols. "I never read the fine print," I whispered. "I was so thrilled to be here. I just signed everything." "None of us read it carefully," Beverly said. "They made sure of that." The lab shuddered around us as the massive creature shifted position outside. Through the observation windows, I could see its bioluminescent patches pulsing in complex patterns, not random flashes, organized signals. "Cody," I called into my headset, "what's your status on that evacuation pod?" His voice crackled back through static. "Got one pod operational, but Francis, the surface conditions are brutal. 40-foot swells, hurricane-force winds. We launch now, we might not survive the ascent." "Better than staying here with those things hunting us." "Maybe," Cody said. "But there's something else. I'm reading massive electrical discharges from the creature outside. It's generating some kind of electromagnetic field." I looked back at the observation windows. The creature's bioluminescent patches were pulsing faster now, and I realized the patterns looked familiar. The same rhythmic flashing I'd seen from Zane's enhanced specimens. Beverly saw it too. Her face went white. "Oh God, it's calling to them." "What do you mean?" "The enhanced specimens. They're responding to its signals." She pointed at the flooded storage area where we could hear splashing sounds. "It's not just some random deep-sea creature, Francis. It's their parent." The pieces clicked together in my head. The massive size, the intelligence, the way it had come straight for our lab. "You think it followed them here?" "I think it's been looking for them," Beverly said. "And now it knows where they are." A new plan started forming. If the creature wanted its offspring back, maybe we could use that. "We need to collect the enhanced specimens. All of them." "Are you insane?" "Think about it. That thing out there isn't trying to destroy us. It's trying to get its children back. We give them to it, maybe it lets us go." Beverly nodded slowly. "The specimens are still in the flooded sections. If we can capture them..." "I'll get the containment equipment," I said, heading toward the emergency supplies. That's when Beverly's scream echoed through the lab. I spun around to see the black dragon dropping from an air vent directly above the communications console. Beverly tried to dodge, but the enhanced creature was too fast. Its needle-sharp teeth sank into her shoulder, and I could see the dark venom pumping into her bloodstream. "Beverly!" I grabbed another flare and rushed toward her, but the black dragon had already disappeared back into the ventilation system. She was on the floor, convulsing as the enhanced toxins spread through her nervous system. The same black veins that had killed Zane were already creeping up her neck. "Francis," she gasped, her voice slurring. "The research data. You have to destroy it, all of it. Save your strength. We'll get you medical attention on the surface." "No." Her eyes were losing focus. "The applications, the enhancement protocols. If this technology gets out..." She convulsed once more, then went still. I knelt beside her body, feeling the weight of everything that had gone wrong. 3 months of what I'd thought was legitimate research, and it had all been a lie. We'd been creating monsters, and now those monsters were killing us one by one. "Francis," Cody's voice came through my headset. I heard screaming. "What's your status?" "Beverly's dead," I said quietly. "The black dragon got her." Silence for several seconds. Then, "I'm sorry, man, but we need to move. I've got the pod ready, and I'm reading some weird changes in that creature's behavior." I looked out the observation windows. The massive creature was moving differently now, its bioluminescent patches flashing in rapid, urgent patterns, like it was agitated about something. "Cody, you said it's been generating electrical fields?" "Yeah, massive ones. But here's the thing. I've been monitoring our site for 3 months, and this area's been unusually quiet. No major predators, no territorial disputes. Almost like something's been keeping the really dangerous stuff away from us." The realization hit me like a physical blow. "It's been protecting us." "What?" "That creature. It's been keeping other predators away from our lab. That's why our research site has been so peaceful." I stared at the massive form outside our windows. It's been guarding this area. Guarding it from what? I thought about the enhanced specimens loose in our lab, the weapons technology we'd developed, the toxins that could kill in seconds. From us. From what we've been creating down here. The creature's bioluminescent patches pulsed brighter, and I could feel the electromagnetic interference increasing. It knew its offspring were in danger, trapped in a facility that had turned them into weapons. "Cody, we have a choice to make," I said into my headset. "We can take that pod to the surface and save ourselves, or we can make sure this weapons technology never sees daylight. What are you thinking?" I looked around the lab at all our research equipment, the specimen containers, the data servers full of enhancement protocols, everything that could be used to create more creatures like the ones that had killed my colleagues. I'm thinking maybe it's time to clean up our own mess. The creature outside pulsed with electricity, waiting to see what we would choose. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I knew exactly what I had to do. I stared at the research servers humming quietly in the corner of the lab, their drives packed with 3 months of enhancement protocols and weapons development data. Everything Zane had created, every modification that had turned harmless deep-sea creatures into killers. "Cody, how do we destroy all of this?" His voice crackled through my headset from wherever he was working on the escape pod. "You mean the data? We could wipe the drives, but corporate probably has backups topside." "Not just the data, everything. The specimens, the research, the whole facility." I looked around at the lab that had been my dream job. "We can't let anyone else get their hands on this technology." Static filled my headset for several seconds. Then Cody's voice came back, quieter. "Francis, are you talking about what I think you're talking about? The nuclear power core? If we overload it?" "That's not exactly a controlled shutdown procedure." I walked over to the observation windows where the massive creature still waited in the darkness. Its bioluminescent patches were pulsing slower now, almost like it was thinking. This thing's been protecting the deep ocean from us, hasn't it? Keeping other predators away so we couldn't turn them into weapons too. Maybe. But Francis, if we overload the reactor, we've got maybe 20 minutes to get clear before the whole place implodes. 20 minutes to climb 11 kilometers through crushing black water, in a pod that might not even survive the ascent. Can you get the escape pod ready? Already working on it, but I need to tell you something first. I heard footsteps on the access ladder, and Cody appeared in the main lab area. His coveralls were soaked with hydraulic fluid, and he had that expression people get when they're about to confess something terrible. "I'm not who you think I am," he said. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I work for Meridian Industries. They sent me here to document what was really happening at the Benthic lab." He pulled a small recording device from his tool belt. "Corporate espionage. I've been recording everything for 3 months." I stared at him, feeling like the floor was dissolving under my feet. "You're a spy." "I'm a whistleblower," Cody said. "Meridian suspected illegal bioweapons development, but they needed proof. Evidence that would hold up in international court. So you've been lying to us this whole time." "I've been doing my job." "But Francis, after seeing what happened to Allison and the others," he looked down at his hands. "Some things are more important than corporate contracts." The lab shuddered around us as the creature outside shifted position. Through the windows, I could see it moving away from our hull, like it sensed what we were planning. "It knows," I whispered. "What?" "The creature. It knows we're going to destroy the lab." I watched the massive form retreat into the darkness. "It's getting clear of the blast radius." Cody nodded grimly. "Then we better move fast. The reactor controls are in Section 4, but I'll need to manually override about 6 different safety systems." "How long?" 15 minutes if everything goes right. Longer if the enhanced specimens decide to interfere." I grabbed the remaining emergency flares from the wall kit. "I'll keep them busy. You get that reactor overloaded." We split up, Cody heading toward the power core while I made my way through the lab with flares ready. The emergency lighting cast everything in that hellish red glow, and I could hear wet sliding sounds from the air vents above. The black dragon was still up there somewhere, along with whatever was left of the anglerfish. Enhanced predators with toxins that could kill in seconds, loose in a facility that was about to become a nuclear bomb. "Reactor access achieved." Cody's voice came through my headset. "Beginning override sequence." I lit a flare and held it high, scanning the ceiling for movement. "How long do we have once you start the overload?" 22 minutes until critical failure. But Francis, there's something else you need to know." "What now?" "The recording device I've been carrying. It's got everything. Zane's enhancement protocols, Beverly's conversations with corporate, the whole weapons development program. If we make it to the surface, this evidence could shut down bioweapons research permanently." A section of ceiling grating crashed down near the specimen tanks. The black dragon dropped through, its enhanced body gleaming in the flare light. But instead of attacking, it seemed confused, disoriented, like it was responding to signals from the creature outside. "Override sequence initiated," Cody announced. "We've got 20 minutes." The black dragon's bioluminescent patches started flashing in rapid patterns, and I realized it was trying to communicate with something. Its parent, maybe. The massive creature that had been protecting this area for who knows how long. "Cody, the escape pod. Is it ready?" "Ready as it's going to be. But Francis, the ascent's going to take 18 hours minimum. That's a long time to think about what we've done down here. 18 hours to process the fact that my entire career had been built on weapons development. that every specimen I'd studied, every data point I'd collected, had been used to create killers. The lab's hull groaned as pressure systems began failing. Emergency alarms started blaring as the reactor moved toward critical overload. In the distance, I could see the massive creature's bioluminescent patches pulsing one final time before it disappeared into the absolute darkness of the deep ocean. "Pods ready!" Cody shouted over the alarms. "We need to go now!" I took one last look around the lab that had been my dream job. The specimen tanks, the research equipment, the data servers full of enhancement protocols. In 20 minutes, it would all be gone, vaporized in a nuclear implosion that would make sure this technology never saw daylight. "Francis," Cody was already at the pod access hatch. "Move." I ran toward the escape pod, leaving behind 3 months of what I'd thought was legitimate research. Behind me, the reactor alarms grew louder as the power core moved toward critical failure. The massive creature was out there somewhere in the darkness, probably heading back to the deepest trenches where humans couldn't follow, where it could continue protecting undiscovered life from people like us. I sealed the pod hatch behind me as Cody initiated the ascent sequence. 18 hours to the surface. 18 hours to figure out how to live with what we'd learned down here. The pod shuddered as we began our long climb toward daylight, leaving behind the wreckage of everything I'd believed about scientific research. But maybe that was okay. Maybe some discoveries were too dangerous to make. Maybe some secrets were meant to stay buried in the deep.